morning. My name is Avi Behar, and I am the CEO of the Behar Group. I'm really excited to be in a lovely park on the lakeshore in Burlington, waiting for a good friend and colleague in the industry, Derek Lobo, the CEO and founder of Rock Advisors. This is going to be great.
Turn it up a little bit more.
So Derek, I'm really happy to be here with you. It's a wonderful setting. I mean, we're in Burlington, right on the lakeshore, and the suggestion for us to hook up for a conversation in this locale was brilliant. So thank you for taking the time.
Well, it's just a pleasure to be here, and thanks for coming out to Burlington. This is sort of my hometown, right? And so you can see here the lake. There's the Burlington Skyway, and that's where I started off my career, actually working on the other side of that skyway in the steel industry.
Turn it up a little bit.
We focus on, I think, different niches, but I think we've grown our respective businesses predominantly by being niche-based and focusing on certain specialties and getting pretty good at those, and then leveraging those in order to expand other business units and build something larger.
I've been a consultant in the business for 30 years. It was about 7-8 years ago we decided to open up a brokerage firm. And before we opened the brokerage firm, I started studying brokerage firms and said, look, who's doing things well and who's doing things that could be improved, and we picked off sort of the best ideas from Canadian and US firms. So here's sort of some guiding principles, I think, of our firm, but I think I see it in your firm also. So number one is specialize. So you've got to be focused. I mean, gone really is the day of the one-man broker. You can't sell an apartment building, sell an office building, sell a laundromat, and do a feasibility study on a real estate development. So you need to have people who are specialists. So we focus strictly in on the apartment business. So let's just frame the Ontario apartment industry, right? We do work across the province and other provinces, but most of the work is here. So we've got about 25,000 apartment buildings in Ontario, 6 units or more, right? So that's the size of the universe. So if you want to sell 25,001 buildings, you can't, because this sort of doesn't exist. So there's 25,000 apartment buildings, and they're owned by 13,000 owners, right? So it's a widely stratified business. No one person can have a relationship with 13,000 people. No one company can. So that leads to why brokers should work together, right? You can't know the entire marketplace. You might have their name, address, and phone number, but it doesn't mean you have a relationship with them. So the apartment business in Ontario is probably different than the apartment business in most other jurisdictions. And that's because we've had one thing in Ontario that's been unique. We've had rent controls. So they came in 1975, and it's been a difficult experience. So really in 1975, most construction stopped. Then in 1998, we had vacancy decontrol brought in, and new apartment buildings were exempt from rent control. So 24,000 buildings were built before 1975. So they're all older, and a lot of them sit on very valuable land. So you go through the city of Toronto, and you drive to any good neighborhood, you'll see 6 plexes, 8 plexes, 10 plexes, 20 plexes that are sitting on large lots, right? Or we call it the tower in the park. And those sites probably need to be redeveloped and should be redeveloped. And the city will allow redeveloping, but if you're going to tear down a 10-unit building and build a 60-unit building in its place, which makes good common sense to do, you've got to replace 10 apartments at affordable rents, right? Sometimes apartments should be torn down and replaced with retail, condominium, and things like that. So certainly, a lot of people who are buying apartments today are buying it for the intrinsic and underlying land value, right? They may not be able to unlock that value today, because legislation doesn't allow them just to tear down a building and put something up. But there's some intrinsic land value there.
We're also dealing with a number of developers who are looking increasingly towards purpose-building rental apartments. And as part of our advisory group, we're also evaluating different highest and best uses for specific sites. And increasingly, we're looking towards purpose-built rental as being appropriate for certain areas. Can you speak a little bit towards why that is and some of the advantages to starting from scratch?
I think that new apartment construction is probably the best real estate development opportunity in Canada today. Because we've had rent controls in Ontario and in Quebec and in various provinces, it's stymied the development of apartments. So, and that's happened for the last 20, 30 years in Ontario and Quebec. That rent control legislation has now been minimized. So the perfect storm has happened in Canada. We have Canada looking pretty good on the world economy, right? We've got low interest rates, low cap rates, right? And incredible demand from both renters and from investors. So that combination, I think, has really come together nicely, in 2014 to develop new apartments. So I think you're going to see a lot of apartments built.
One of the core areas of focus within your business is student housing. Can you speak a little bit towards what you look for in terms of markets that are appropriate for student housing, and how you gauge, potential densities that would be absorbed in those areas?
I have 3 university-age daughters, so I'm living this world of student housing. My kids moving out of the house and moving into rentals and things like that, and there's something really fun about student housing. You're working with young people. It's a vibrant business to do. But the main reason to work in student housing is that the development profit in student housing is higher than in apartment development. And it's simple. You're going to get more dollars per square foot by renting out a 4-bedroom apartment to 4 students than you would by renting out, the traditional 1 or 2 bedroom apartment. So we call it by the bed versus by the door. So you can get more revenue from 1,200 square feet when you rent it to 4 students than you could from 1,200 square feet divided up into, 1.5 apartments or something like that. The downside to student housing is more management intensive. So in 100,000 square feet in a regular apartment building, you might have 120 or 130, 140 people living there. In 100,000 square feet of student housing, you might have 400 students living there, right? So you're running a more management intensive business.